He thought his bank was running smoothly until he went undercover and found a terrified employee trapped under a manager's control. Derek Lawson had spent his entire life working his way up in the banking industry. He wasn't born into wealth. He didn't have connections that smoothed his path. Everything he had, he built from the ground up, starting as a part-time teller in college, grinding through long hours and dealing with impatient customers while balancing coursework. He knew what it meant to work behind the counter, to clock in and out, and to worry about making ends meet. That's why, even after becoming the CEO of Ashford National Bank, he refused to sit in a corner office and make decisions based solely on reports and numbers. A spreadsheet didn't tell you what was really happening in your branches. The real story lived in the break rooms, in the quiet conversations between employees, in the exhausted sighs at the end of a long shift. So every few months, Derek went undercover. No suit, no title, no corporate entourage, just a man walking into his own banks as a regular customer. Most of the time he found small issues, long wait times, an employee struggling with the software, a customer service rep who looked like they could use a break. But every now and then, he saw something that shook him. Tonight, he chose a small branch in Columbus, Ohio. It wasn't struggling, according to the reports. Profits were steady. Customer satisfaction scores were solid. On paper, it was just another ordinary location. But numbers didn't show you everything. Derek walked in wearing a navy blue button-down, sleeves rolled up, and a pair of jeans. He looked like any other customer stopping by after work. The bank had that early evening quiet, just a handful of customers finishing up transactions before heading home. The lighting was a little too fluorescent, the air conditioning a little too cold. Behind the counter, tellers handled deposits and withdrawals with the efficiency of people who had done it 1,000 times before. A middle-aged man in front of him fumbled with his debit card, trying to explain something to the teller. The young woman behind the counter smiled politely, but there was tension behind her eyes. Derek glanced around. A manager in a stiff grey suit hovered near the back, watching the interactions closely. Something about his posture was off, not just observant, controlling. But Derek didn't have time to analyze further, because that's when he heard it. A soft, muffled sound coming from the hallway to the left. He barely noticed it at first. But when the customer in front of him finally moved along, the sound became clearer. Someone was crying. Not loud, not dramatic. A quiet, stifled sob. The kind you let out when you're trying not to break. Derek turned slightly, following the sound with his eyes. The break room door was slightly ajar, and inside he caught a glimpse of a young woman. Her head bowed, fingers gripping the edge of the table like she was trying to keep herself together. Another employee stood beside her, speaking in hushed tones. Derek didn't know her, but the look on her face hit him like a punch to the gut. Something was very wrong. But the question was, what? And that's when Derek decided he wasn't leaving until he found out. Derek stood in line, his body still facing the counter, but his mind was elsewhere. The crying. It wasn't just frustration. It was pain. He knew the difference. He had seen employees overwhelmed by busy days or irritated by difficult customers. But this was something deeper. His instincts told him to walk over, ask if she was okay. But he wasn't Derek Lawson, CEO, in this moment. He was just another customer, a stranger. Instead, he listened. The other employee, a young man, maybe mid-20s, kept his voice low, trying to console her. Derek caught fragments. Jasmine, you can't let him. He doesn't own you. Jasmine, that was her name. Her response was nearly a whisper. But Derek picked up the defeat in her tone. What choice do I have? She said. He's already made it clear. If I don't do what he says, I'm gone. Derek's jaw tightened. His first thought, a customer issue. Maybe someone had harassed her. Banks saw their fair share of entitled customers who thought they could talk down to tellers. But the way she said it, if I don't do what he says, that wasn't about a customer. That was about someone inside the bank. Before he could think further, the teller in front of him called out, Sir, I can help you over here. Derek turned and walked up, offering a polite smile. The young man behind the counter, Kenny according to his name tag, looked fresh out of college. How's your day going? Derek asked, keeping his voice light. Kenny hesitated, just for a second. It was barely noticeable, but Derek caught it. It's been good, Kenny said, forcing a smile. How can I help you today? Derek pulled a deposit slip from his pocket, something he always carried when doing these undercover visits. Just need to make a deposit. Kenny took the slip and entered the account number into the system, but Derek could see it. The tension in his shoulders, the way his fingers hovered over the keyboard before typing. He was distracted, on edge. Derek glanced at the manager near the back of the bank, the one with the stiff posture and the constant surveillance. His gaze flickered toward the break room just for a second. Kenny must have noticed Derek looking because he suddenly spoke up, lowering his voice. "Do you work in banking?" Derek raised an eyebrow. "What makes you ask?" Kenny hesitated, then shrugged. "You just seem like you've been in a branch before." Derek smiled. "Yeah, I used to be a teller, a long time ago." Something in Kenny's face shifted, a mix of relief and hesitation, like he wanted to say something, but wasn't sure if he should. Derek gave him a moment, but Kenny glanced over his shoulder again, toward the manager, and just like that, the opportunity was gone. Kenny slid the receipt across the counter. "Here you go, sir. Anything else I can help with?" Derek took the receipt, but he wasn't done here. "No, I'm good," he said, pocketing it. Then lowering his voice, he added, "But take care of yourself, Kenny." Kenny stiffened, just for a second, but Derek saw it. He stepped away from the counter, heading toward the exit. But he had no intention of leaving. Instead, he stopped near the loan officer's desk and pretended to check his phone. From here, he had a perfect view of the break room. Jasmine had wiped her face and was sitting up straight now, but her hands still trembled in her lap. The young man beside her was speaking urgently, shaking his head. But she wasn't meeting his eyes. And then, Derek saw it. The manager, Mr. Stiff Posture, walking toward them. His steps were slow, calculated, like a predator approaching prey. And as soon as Jasmine saw him, her entire body tensed. She hurriedly grabbed her phone, stuffing it into her pocket, and stood up like she had been caught doing something wrong. The manager said something Derek couldn't hear, but whatever it was, Jasmine gave the smallest, almost imperceptible nod. Then she walked past him, head down, and made her way back to the teller stations. Derek wasn't sure what he had just witnessed. But one thing was clear. Whatever was happening here, it wasn't good. And he wasn't walking away. Derek watched as Jasmine returned to her station, her movements stiff and mechanical. She forced a smile at the next customer, but it didn't reach her eyes. She was running on autopilot, just trying to get through the day. And the manager? He stayed near the break room door, arms crossed, watching. Derek knew this kind of dynamic. He had seen it before. A toxic workplace always had the same signs. Employees who flinched when their supervisor walked by. Conversations that stopped the moment a certain person entered the room. The unspoken tension in the air. Not loud, not obvious, but there if you knew where to look. He had a decision to make. He could leave and handle this from a corporate level, investigating from a distance. That was the safe professional way. Or he could get his answers now. Derek took a slow breath, adjusting his posture. If he wanted people to open up, he had to come at this the right way. He scanned the room, looking for an opening. Kenny was helping another customer. Jasmine was back at her station, avoiding eye contact with the manager. But the young man who had been in the break room with her, he was standing near the side counter, organizing a stack of deposit slips, his jaw tight. Derek walked over, keeping his voice casual. "Excuse me, do you have a pen?" The young man looked up, startled. "Oh, yeah, of course." He grabbed one from the cup beside him and handed it over. Derek took it but didn't walk away. He glanced at the employee's name tag, Miles. "Hey, Miles," Derek said, lowering his voice. "I couldn't help but notice. Your friend seems upset." Miles's expression didn't change, but his grip on the stack of papers tightened. "She's fine." Derek tilted his head. "She doesn't look fine." Miles swallowed, eyes darting toward the manager, who was now near the back office, speaking with another employee. Then he exhaled, like he was trying to decide whether to trust Derek or not. "She's not fine," he admitted, voice barely above a whisper. Derek leaned in slightly. "Is it a customer issue?" Miles hesitated, and that pause told Derek everything. "No," Miles muttered. It's her personal business." That was a lie. Not because Miles wanted to mislead him, but because he was afraid. Derek could see it in the way he kept his voice low, in how his eyes kept flicking toward the manager. "How long has she been working here?" Derek asked, keeping his tone light, conversational. "A little over a year," Miles answered automatically. Then he tensed. "Why?" Derek shrugged. "Just wondering if she likes it here." Miles let out a humorless chuckle. "She doesn't, but she can't afford to leave." And there it was, the real problem. Jasmine wasn't just unhappy. She wasn't just stressed. She was trapped. Derek's gut tightened. He had seen situations like this before, where employees felt stuck, unable to walk away because of financial pressure, personal struggles, or worse, fear. And now he had a feeling this wasn't just about a bad work environment. Something else was going on here. Something bigger. Before he could ask anything else, Miles stiffened. Derek didn't have to turn around to know why. The manager was walking toward them. The air shifted, thick with something unspoken. Derek could feel the power dynamic in the room change in real time. "Everything okay over here?" the manager asked, voice smooth but firm. Miles immediately dropped his gaze, busying himself with the papers in front of him. "Yes, sir. Just helping a customer." Derek turned, finally facing the man up close. Mid-40s, crisp suit, sharp features, eyes that had seen too much and cared too little. This wasn't just a bad boss. This was someone who knew exactly how much control he had, and enjoyed it. The name tag on his blazer read Ron Halverson. "Can I help you with something?" Halverson asked, tone polite but edged. Derek offered a casual smile. "Just getting a pen. Miles here was kind enough to help me out." Halverson didn't break eye contact. "Good." He clapped Miles on the shoulder, a little too firm. "Let's stay focused on work." Miles nodded quickly, eyes on the papers. "Yes, sir." Derek clenched his jaw but didn't react. Not yet. He thanked Miles and stepped away, feeling Halverson's eyes on him the entire time. As he made his way toward the door, his mind was already made up. He wasn't leaving. Not until he found out exactly what was happening in this bank. Derek stepped outside, letting the evening air cool his frustration. But he wasn't leaving. Not yet. He walked toward his car, just far enough to make it look like he was done with his business, then leaned against the hood, pretending to check his phone. In reality, he was thinking. Hard. Something wasn't adding up. Jasmine was terrified. Miles was hesitant. And Halverson, that man had the look of someone who thrived on control. Derek had dealt with plenty of bad managers before, but this was different. This was calculated. If he wanted real answers, he needed to talk to someone who wasn't afraid. And then, as if the universe was working in his favor, Kenny stepped outside. The young teller from earlier was standing near the side entrance, scrolling through his phone, probably on a break. Derek made his move. He walked up casually, hands in his pockets. "Long day." Kenny looked up, startled, then relaxed when he recognized him. "Yeah, Fridays are always busy." Derek nodded. "Mind if I ask you something?" Kenny hesitated but shrugged. "Sure." Derek kept his voice light. "Your branch manager?" "Halverson. What's he like?" Kenny's expression darkened. It was quick, just a flicker, but Derek caught it. "He's strict," Kenny said carefully. "Likes things done a certain way." Derek tilted his head. "That normal for managers?" Kenny exhaled, looking around as if checking for eavesdroppers. Then he lowered his voice. "He's not just strict. He's..." Kenny struggled for the right word. "He pushes people. Hard. Especially Jasmine." Derek folded his arms. "How so?" Kenny hesitated again, like he was debating whether to say more. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, he said something that made Derek's stomach turn. "He makes her stay late. Alone." Derek's muscles tensed. "She's the only one?" he asked, keeping his voice even, and he nodded. "Yeah. And he's always talking to her like she owes him something. I've seen it, man. The way she tenses up when he calls her into his office. It's not normal." Derek's grip tightened around his arm. He had seen this before. A manager who played power games with employees, singling out the vulnerable ones, making them feel like they had no choice but to obey. "She ever say anything about it?" Derek asked. Kenny shook his head. "No, but she doesn't have to. We all see it." Derek let out a slow breath. Now, he wasn't just dealing with a toxic boss. He was dealing with a predator, and that changed everything. "Thanks for telling me, Kenny," Derek said, patting him on the shoulder. "You're a good guy." Kenny gave a half smile but still looked uneasy. Derek turned, glancing back at the building. Jasmine was still inside, still under Halverson's control. And now, Derek knew exactly what he needed to do. Derek wasn't waiting. Not when he had seen this pattern before. He had climbed his way up through the banking world, and he knew how easy it was for a man in power to twist the system in his favor. The employees under Halverson's control weren't just uncomfortable. They were afraid. And Jasmine? She was at the center of it. Derek pushed open the glass doors and walked back inside. The bank was quieter now. Fewer customers, fewer witnesses. But Halverson was still there, standing near the teller stations, scanning the room like he owned it. Derek's footsteps were steady as he crossed the lobby. He didn't stop at the counter. He didn't hesitate. He went straight for Jasmine. She was mid-conversation with a customer, her voice mechanical, her hands steady. But her eyes looked hollow. She saw Derek approach and tensed slightly, like she expected trouble. "Excuse me," Derek said, just loud enough for the customer to hear. "I need to speak with you for a moment." Jasmine blinked, confused. I'm with a customer, sir." The older woman in front of her gave Derek a sharp look. "She's helping me right now. You can wait." But Derek kept his eyes on Jasmine. "It's important." And she knew. She swallowed, apologized to the customer, and stepped away from the counter. Halverson noticed immediately. Derek saw him straighten, his eyes narrowing. He didn't like losing control. Jasmine led Derek a few steps away, fidgeting with the edge of her blazer. What can I help you with, sir?" Derek took a slow breath. Now was the moment. "I know what's happening," he said, keeping his voice low. "You don't have to say anything. I just need you to know. You're not alone." Jasmine flinched. For a second, just a second, she looked like she might break. But she didn't. She shook her head, smiling tightly. "I don't know what you mean." Derek wasn't giving up. "Halverson, the late shifts, the way he treats you. I know it's not okay." Jasmine's fingers curled into fists. Fear. That's what this was. And fear meant she thought there were no options left. "I can't," she whispered. "You can," Derek said firmly. "And you will, because I promise you he's not untouchable." That's when Halverson walked over. "Is there a problem here?" he asked smoothly, eyes flicking between them. Derek turned to him, keeping his expression neutral, just having a conversation. Halverson's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Well, Jasmine has a job to do. She doesn't have time for private discussions." Jasmine froze at the word private. Derek didn't miss it. "Actually," Derek said, "I think we should have a conversation. Right now." Halverson's smirk faltered. "Excuse me?" Derek didn't respond. Instead, he reached into his pocket and pulled out his wallet. He flipped it open, revealing his executive ID badge from Ashford National Bank. Jasmine gasped. Miles from across the room stared in shock. Halverson's face went completely blank. "My name is Derek Lawson," he said, voice steady, "CEO of this bank, and you and I need to talk." The entire room fell silent. Halverson blinked rapidly, his mouth opening, then closing. For the first time, he looked nervous. "Sir, I didn't realize." "No, you didn't," Derek said, stepping closer. "And that's the problem, isn't it?" Jasmine took a shaky breath, looking between them, as if still processing what was happening. Derek turned to her, voice gentle. "You're safe now." And this time she believed him. The silence stretched for what felt like forever. Jasmine stood frozen, her breath uneven. Miles, Kenny, and the rest of the employees had stopped what they were doing, eyes flicking between Derek and Halverson. Customers whispered among themselves, sensing something bigger than an ordinary work dispute. But Derek, he didn't break eye contact with Halverson. "You and I need to talk. In your office," Derek said, his voice steady but firm. Halverson opened his mouth, then shut it. He was scrambling, calculating how much trouble he was actually in. Sir, Halverson stammered, "I assure you, there's been a misunderstanding. If you'd just give me a moment to—" Derek didn't move, didn't blink. "Your office. Now." Halverson swallowed hard, his confidence cracking. He turned stiffly and led the way toward his office. Derek followed, but before stepping inside, he turned back to Jasmine. "Stay here," he said gently. "This won't take long." Jasmine barely nodded, her hands trembling at her sides. Derek stepped inside the office and closed the door behind him. Halverson took a seat at his desk, trying to pull himself together. He let out a forced chuckle, shaking his head. "I have to say, sir, I didn't expect to see you here tonight. A bit unusual for the CEO to visit a branch without notice." Derek leaned forward, resting his hands on the desk. "You know what else is unusual?" he said, voice low. "A branch manager abusing his power to intimidate his employees." Halverson flinched. I know what you've been doing," Derek interrupted. "I know about the late-night shifts. I know about the way you treat Jasmine. And I know you think you can get away with it." Halverson's face paled. "Sir, I assure you, I have always conducted myself professionally. If there have been any misunderstandings, Save it," Derek snapped. He wasn't here for excuses. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. With a single tap, he played back the recording. Jasmine's voice, raw and shaken, came through the speaker. "If I don't do what he says, I'm gone." Then Miles's hushed response. "Jasmine, you can't let him. He doesn't own you." The color drained from Halverson's face. "You should have known better," Derek said, his voice colder now. "You've been playing this game for a long time, haven't you? Preying on the employees who need this job the most, making them feel trapped. But let me be very clear, you just ran out of time." Halverson's hands trembled. "Please, I can explain." Derek straightened. "No, you can't." He pulled out his phone again, this time dialing corporate HR. "You're done," Derek said simply. "You will never work in this industry again." Halverson sat there, frozen, as Derek stepped toward the door. His power was gone, and Derek, he wasn't done yet. When Derek walked out of the office, the tension in the lobby was thick. Jasmine, Miles, Kenny, everyone was waiting. Derek took a breath, then looked directly at Jasmine. "He's gone," he said softly. "You're safe." Her lips parted slightly, her breath catching. Disbelief. Relief. Then for the first time that night, her shoulders relaxed. Miles let out a slow exhale. Kenny looked stunned. Other employees exchanged glances as if they weren't sure whether to believe what they'd just witnessed. But Derek knew this wasn't the end. He turned to the team. "You've all been working under someone who didn't deserve his position. That changes now." Jasmine wiped at her eyes, swallowing hard. "What happens next?" Derek gave her a small, reassuring smile. "You tell me." Jasmine stared at Derek, processing his words. "You tell me." For the first time in over a year, she felt something unfamiliar. Control. She glanced at Miles, who was still in shock, and then at Kenny, who gave a small, hesitant nod. They were all waiting for her to speak. Jasmine took a shaky breath. I don't want anyone else to go through this. Not here. Not anywhere." Derek nodded. "And they won't." He turned to the rest of the employees. "From now on, this branch is under direct review. We'll be making changes, not just replacing Halverson, but making sure no one else like him gets this kind of power again." The room was quiet, but the weight of his words settled in. Then Miles spoke up. "Sir, I don't mean to overstep, but this isn't just about Halverson." Derek's gaze sharpened. "Go on." Miles hesitated, but then he took a step forward. His voice was stronger now. "The way things work here, it's not just one bad manager. The pressure, the way we're treated, the fear of speaking up, it's bigger than just this branch." Kenny nodded in agreement. "A lot of us feel like we have no choice but to put up with it, because the second we complain, we're out of a job." Jasmine looked down, guilt flickering across her face. "I wanted to leave so many times," she admitted, "but I couldn't afford to. And I thought, maybe this was normal." Derek's jaw tightened. This was why he went undercover. Not because of numbers, not because of performance reviews, but because the real problems were the ones hidden beneath the surface. He took a deep breath. "This stops today." Everyone watched him, waiting for what came next. I don't just want to fix this branch. I want to fix the system. And I'll need your help to do that. That means transparency. That means trust. That means if something is wrong, you speak up. Jasmine still looked uncertain. And if we do, will anyone actually listen? Derek met her eyes. I will. Jasmine studied him for a long moment. Then finally she nodded. For the first time that night, she looked like she believed it. An hour later, Derek sat in his car, watching the employees slowly lock up for the night. Jasmine walked out with Miles and Kenny, the three of them talking quietly. They looked lighter, like the weight of the last year had finally started to lift. Derek exhaled, running a hand over his face. This had been one branch, one manager, in one location. But how many more were out there? How many employees, just like Jasmine, were afraid to speak up? How many times had he looked at a spreadsheet and thought everything was fine, when it wasn't? Being a leader wasn't just about profit margins or efficiency. It was about people. And tonight, he had been reminded of exactly why he did this job. Too often, people in power look the other way. They see employees as numbers, not human beings. But leadership isn't about control. It's about responsibility. If you ever feel trapped in a situation where someone is abusing their power, speak up. And if you see someone else struggling, don't stay silent. Because sometimes, all it takes is one person to break the cycle. And if this story resonated with you, share it. You never know who might need to hear it.